Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk a little bit about Quant, how it's been reacting to this crypto rally, and where it might go next. Like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates, better indicators, and more over there. So this is the price chart for Quant. Obviously we're in a bear market, but Quant has been doing surprisingly well inside of this bear market, off of the extreme lows to what has been so far the local high of this bear market. It was up almost 470%, currently trading up about 200% off of those lows. Very impressive price action. You can see that as the rest of the crypto market has gotten more bullish lately, Quant has started to join in, coming off around the $100 mark, rallying all the way up to about 120. Now I think the question on anyone's mind who's looking at Quant is, is it going to just hit resistance here and fall back down? Or could it have legs to go further? So let's talk about that from a few different angles. First thing I want to talk about is just some technicals that we can look at that give us a bit of an idea of where Quant might be expected to go from here. So what I'm showing you here is the volume profile. It's basically the price at which volume has been transacted within this visible range and where that distribution is highest. So basically the highest bar over here is saying that the majority of the volume in this kind of range that we're seeing here was transacted right around these price levels, right around, between the 120 and about 105 mark. And so really what this is suggesting is that there's a lot of QNT that has been transacted here, that's changed hands down here, but that if we can start breaking above that, there's kind of less and less cost basis that sits above that. And the reason you care about that is that cost bases usually act as resistance, or they can. Right? If someone bought, QNT up here at around 140 and price gets back up to it, that person might choose to sell to recoup their investment because they've seen price fall below it recently. And so the more that you can get above people's cost bases, you might actually get into some clear skies where the price can run a bit more free before you ultimately hit some resistance as people decide to start selling. And so if we can break above this range and really get above about the 140, then it wouldn't be unrealistic to think that Quant could go back up and retest these highs back over that we had in October, if not potentially higher should we end up getting there. So I think a lot of that's going to depend on how long the rest of the crypto market remains bullish. But if it does, I think Quant has a reasonable chance. And so those are some, just from a technical perspective, some price points I'm going to be watching. Can we clear above, this 120 mark and kind of decisively break above that? Then the 140, then I think we're targeting some of these higher levels if we can get past there. But let's look at what some of our indicators that we have here on the channel think about Quant's price action, what they're looking at, because they're going to give us different information about where things stand. So this is the upside downside potential indicator, or UDPI. It's our risk model here at the channel. Lower values mean lower risk, higher values mean high risk. So basically, as you can see, generally speaking, it's been advantageous to be buying QNT down in the green zones, and then advantageous to be selling in the red zones. And so this is the long-term version. Here's what moves that play out over months or multiple months. And let's just look at the raw output of this model to see what it's saying a little bit more clearly. So what you can see here is that, we went all the way up to 5 at the top of the bull market, came back down, went all the way back down to between -3 and -4. We then kind of rallied, and then risk rose with it. We were up actually in the positive range here, cooled off, and then rallied up to that local top within this bear market back over here. And now we've cooled off again, back down to this kind of -2, -3 level. And what's interesting about this is that this has been an important level kind of in prior, more bearish times, or in times that have been a transition between bear market and bull market for Quant in the past. You'll see that -3 has oftentimes acted as support on the long-term UDPI. It's kind of where we bounce off of a lot of times before moving back to the upside. And so we're getting down, we got down close to that, and now we're turning the corner again. It would not be completely unreasonable, in my opinion, to then see us start to plot a course to the upside from here, start realizing some of this long-term upside potential that stays above us, and maybe start to look at some of these levels as potential resistance. You can see that around the 1 to 2 level has acted as resistance multiple times in the past for Quant, acted that way here as well. Wouldn't be completely unreasonable for us to get back closer to that level, or at the very least, get up closer to positive values should we have the gas to run further. So really, I think the bet here, or the kind of thing you have to make up your own mind about is, do you think the broader crypto market is going to remain bullish for the next several, while, next month or two? And if so, I think then these ranges are very much within reason. There's quite a bit of upside potential that stays above us that we can go and realize before we end up maybe bumping our heads at a similar resistance level up over here. And if we look at the short-term version of the UDPI that cares about moves that play over days to weeks, the more short-term in the volatility that it cares about, we can actually see that the short-term UDPI got all the way up to just a bit under 3 in this run up here and in this run up here to the local high. And so this is the indicator I'm probably going to be looking at the most with Quant, is that I think if we get back up to these levels again, then that's probably going to mark the top of whatever rally we end up going on. But I think it's possible. I do think it's possible that we could go up and realize some of this. And again, in the short term, the odds are relatively even, although a little bit more skewed to the upside potential outweighing the downside potential here. And so this is what I'm just going to be really watching as we might start moving up. If we start getting up here, I think that's when we're probably going to start tapping this out. And again, it's really going to depend on what happens in broader markets, probably, if crypto is going to be able to continue to run. But so far, so good. And I think there's a reasonable chance of that. And especially if you're watching the CPI data that's going to be coming out tomorrow, then, basically if inflation comes in, at or below expectations, especially if it comes in below expectations, I think you could see, traditional markets really go on a run, then stock market go on a run. And that might give fuel for crypto to continue to go and might give the green light for Quant to do these things that we think are possible. So some of those things are important to watch to see what happens. But if those things line up, I think we could be looking at that level. So not financial advice, of course, you make your own opinions, but that's just what I'm currently thinking looking at these data. Now, if we flip over to the market direction classifier, or MDC, this is a useful model because it tells us basically when, basically this model looks at when things are bullish or bearish. So basically if you're closing above this critical line, this yellow line, that's generally bullish, and you can see some pretty explosive moves to the upside, pretty much ever since the March crash in 2020, except for a couple little times where we just kind of more or less flirted with that line, briefly went below it, but then popped back above it quickly, and more or less spent that entire time above the MDC critical level, just one big bull market. Then we spent, almost this entire drawdown below it with just this little relief rally kind of popping above and then back down. And then we ended up, rallying again, which the MDC was able to identify quite early as the beginning of a new trend. And then, we came down here, spending some time in the red. We're notably just below this level right now. So the critical level here is 126. As I record, we're currently just below that critical level. If we can close above it, and especially if we can close a few days above it or start really popping above it like we did over here, that might just be another confirmation that we might be able to start doing, what I was saying over here and start realizing this short-term upside potential that we know, at least from the model's estimate, Quant has, and maybe start getting back up into those levels. So this is another thing I'm going to be watching closely, another critical level. And it's interesting to note that this level corresponds quite nicely with that technical level we were looking at the beginning with the volume profile, that we can break above this range, then the MDC thinks there might be a reasonable shot at some more upside coming off of that. So something that will be interesting to watch. Now, the final thing that I just want to bring up here is the momentum bias indicator, or MBI. So this is another model we have, as its name suggests. It's about momentum. It's a momentum indicator. And basically, if you're in the green, that's positive momentum. There's a positive momentum bias. And that means that basically price is more likely to continue to move to the upside than the downside. Momentum is going to pull it up. Whereas you're spending a lot of time in the red, that tends to be bearish, and price really gets dragged down during those periods. And what's interesting about what we've been seeing with Quant more recently is it's started to behave a bit like it does in these transitionary periods, where you go into the deep red, kind of like this bearish time here, but then you get back above and you start kind of oscillating around zero. Now, here it kind of spent more time above than below in this oscillation period before we really exploded up. Other assets that you look at the MBIs for, they'll have this kind of more symmetrical pattern, where they'll kind of more equally oscillate up and below zero before building into something that's moving up. And this is the kind of behavior that tends to happen in those kind of transition periods out of a bear market into a bull market. Now, Quant is, of course, part of the broader crypto ecosystem, so I don't think that Quant is likely to go on its own bull market when the rest of the crypto market would continue in the bear market. So I think the rest of the market needs to be bullish for this to be able to take place. But if it is, what Quant might be showing, what I talked about before with Quant, is a early runner, something that's recovered maybe earlier than a lot of other crypto assets in this bear market, but showing that behavior, that if this keeps up, it'd be reasonable to think this might be kind of a accumulation pattern before maybe the next bull run can form. So what we'd like to see is that this to get back up, breach zero again, and that could happen if we go on this rally. That is possible if broader markets allow. And you might start seeing this continuous oscillation pattern, which would be very bullish in my opinion. Even if price more or less kind of chops around in this general zone, if we're seeing this happening on the NBI, that tends to be a sign that you're transitioning out of a bear market into an impending bull market. So of course it's going to depend on broader markets. That's another thing I'm going to be watching to get a better sense of where is Quant right now in the market cycle. Is it still in a bear market and this is just a relief rally, or is it actually turning the corner and starting something different? I think so far the data are suggesting that it's very possible it's turning the corner, and who knows, this could have been the bottom. Still too early to call that definitively, obviously. I'm not going to do that. It's very possible that Quant rolls over back down into a deep bear market from here if broader markets tank or something else happens. But if that doesn't happen, if we get this oscillation, I think that's going to be a really good sign. I think it's very possible we get that if we get this rally materializing. So kind of overall then, what I would say with Quant is I think that we are in a position where a rally is very possible. And so if you're thinking about it probabilistically, the things are lining up where a move to the upside is very plausible. It's very reasonable to think that that could happen. And I think what we're going to want to watch in the shorter term is just first the technical factors. Can we start clearing some of those important levels like the MDC, like what we're seeing over here? But then also things like the CPI data. Does that surprise to the downside at expectation, or is it a surprise to the upside? Surprise to the upside might cut the party short, and we won't even get any maybe reasonable moves further to the upside if markets roll over. But especially if it's a surprise to the downside, that could give fuel to broader markets, which would then help float the boat across the crypto market and then help pull Quant up. And then again, what I'd be looking for is somewhere probably in this price range on a technical level, as we get up kind of over here. But then more specifically, I'll be looking at things like the short-term UDPI to see when it's peaking out. And I'll make update videos if we get to those levels, talking about when the short-term UDPI might be indicating a likely top is forming. So none of this is financial advice, of course. You should look at these data, with your own eyes, make your own judgments, of what you think is likely. That's just what I'm kind of thinking about these data right now. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates, better indicators, and more over there.